Testing.
Okay, is everybody ready? We'll start the meeting. Is everybody be seated, please? Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Virginia Council Chambers. This is a regularly scheduled City Council meeting, Committee of the Whole meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. The time is 9 a.m. We have a full council present. Britt C. Bennis, our city administrator, is on leave today, and so I'll be trying to muddle through the agenda on her behalf. Thank you for everybody who's going to present today, and those who are watching the council meeting, and those who are listening and viewing at home. So we'll start on appearances. Number 1, Adam Venny from the Range Transitional Housing, a request for a waiver of a building permit fee for the emergency housing project. Adam, would you please come forward? And for the record, please state your name and welcome to the council committee whole meeting. Yeah, here you go.
Is it working now?
It is.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
So Adam Venn with Range Transitional Housing. I did bring some pictures because I know there's a few new faces around here. And I don't know if you guys know where we're at or what we're doing. So, just a quick background, we're looking at developing a 4-unit emergency housing for families on our property over here on 5th Street North. So these are, I just gave you some basic pictures. The first page is the drawing of what we're looking at building. And the second page is our office located on 5th Street North. And then the third page is the property we purchased a few years ago and demolished a couple years ago on 5th Street, 214 5th Street. And there's a few pictures of what we took down. I know this has probably gone through, most of you have probably seen this, but and then the last page is just a location, so you know what we're talking about. And on that last page, so we're developing on the east side of our office where we tore that building down. And then we're in the process of doing a kind of a land swap purchase agreement with the HRA to acquire that property to the north and west. So that garage in that property to the west of our office. So yeah, we're coming. I mean, we're getting close. Lindsay's ready to get after it. We're just waiting on St. Louis County to get us what it's called. I'm just drawing a blank, an environmental review. So, yeah, so I approached Britt. Lindsay brought it up to us and said, you know, maybe you could ask the city, and I've talked to the mayor about potential waiving some of the building fees. So, so that's why I'm here. We're really close. The IRRB, we're on their agenda tomorrow with the city on an application for $400,000 for community development funding, and the county's throwing in about 1.4 of ARPA funds, and then for that environmental review, that's another 250 of county ESG funds. So our funding's really close, and as soon as we get these last few things in place, we're gonna start digging. So, any questions? I was hoping Britt was gonna be here to walk through everything, but.
Well, no, I think you put it in a nutshell, and your request today is for us to consider a waiver of the permit fee for the construction, of that, and you did have some conversation with our city administrator about that, and that's why you're here to make this presentation today, a request for that transition. I did have an opportunity to ask our city attorney if this is something that's been done in the past, the waiver of these fees for these types of projects, and he says yes, that it has been done in the past and can be done, and is all the way up to the council's discretion to determine whether that's appropriate or not. And based upon your project, we've seen and we've discussed this before, so we're well aware of where you're at and where you need to be. I'm just going to ask Jenny, any concerns, comments, or information with respect to this building project and the request that's being made today by Range Transitional Housing?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I would like to bring to your attention is that there's a state portion of the fees that we may not be able to waive. I think that the council may be able to waive, whatever city fee there is, but there is also a state fee portion. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yes, thank you for that differentiation, Jenny. Okay, so that's the request moving forward. So looking for council action. We'll start from left to right. Councilor Paulson, then we'll move on then to Councilor Johnson. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So what exactly is the actual fee that the dollar amount we're being asked to waive? Do we know?
Jenny?
I don't know the exact fee. I did talk to the building official this morning, and she indicated that it's proportional to, I think the size of the structure. And it's in the maybe thousands of dollar range potentially for the city portion of that fee.
Okay, based on that, I'll move to waive the fee.
Okay, Counselor Paulson moves to waive the fee, permit fee, the city portion of the permit fee for the Range Transitional Housing Project, and is supported by Counselor Freely. Further discussion, Counselor Johnson?
I have none at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, so it has been moved and supported to waive the fee, the city portion of the fee for the permit for this project for Range Transitional Housing. Is there any further discussion? A hearing is, Counselor Freely.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the viability and the necessity of the services you provide, and that's the reason we're moving forward with this on your behalf.
Thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Council. Next item on the agenda is Matt Reed, SCH, our engineer of record, to discuss the change order for the 2021 street project due to an increase in oil prices, which is a shocker. Mr. Reed?
Morning.
Morning.
I will try to keep this short. I want to explain all of this and try to make sure everybody understands what the request is here, because there is a carryover from last year, and you may or may not remember doing that. So what you have in front of you is a request from the contractor due to what they have seen as an increase in asphalt oil prices over the last couple of years. The asphalt oil is used in the bituminous mix that goes down as blacktop pavement, which, by the way, they're paving today. So that's good news. That project, we'll probably see Southern Drive today and Third Avenue tomorrow. And so once they get that done, then we should be just about wrapped up with this project. So, on a project like this with a unit price contract that we put together, the contractor back in 2021, they put together their bid based on the scope, schedule, and fee of the 21 through 23 project, knowing what they were going to have to put down for blacktop the various years. That hasn't changed. There's no changes in what the actual scope was. Typically, on these projects, the unit price that is bid during the bidding process by the contractors is what is held throughout the course of the project, regardless of if it's a 2-year or 3-year, unless there is a specific allotment for an adjustment. Otherwise, it becomes a change order. The change orders obviously are allowed if there's an extenuating circumstance, unforeseen conditions, things like that, then we come and we talk about change orders and change in unit prices. Last year, the contractor came and requested, so let me pause there for a second. What they're requesting in your packet is a change from the 2021 cost of asphalt oil to the 2023 cost, okay? Last year, they came forward and asked for a change from the 2021 to the 2022 cost. Okay, so that number was, you see 415 in 2021, you see 610 in 2023, it was 570 in 2022. Now, 415 to 570 is a pretty significant jump. And that was, if you remember last summer, oil prices, diesel prices, gas prices in your cars were quite high. And so when we visited this about this time last year, the council did approve the change in unit price to account for the increases last year, because they were more than what we would normally expect the contractor to foresee when they're putting their bids together. And so the unit price currently sits at the 570 unit. That was for all of the asphalt oil moving forward, so that includes this year. So what they're really asking for in this is the difference between the 570 and the 610. So it's not, I think the number is like $16,000, it's actually like less than 4, the increase this year that they're asking for. Does that make sense? Okay, so then the question becomes, are they entitled to the change from 570 to 610? That ultimately is going to be your decision as a council. Something to keep in mind, though, in this instance, they normally, again, when you're putting together a unit price for a 3-year project, there is a certain amount. I would imagine, I don't know, I don't put the bids together for the contractors, but I would imagine there's a certain amount certain percentage of whether call it inflation, expected material price increases based on their experience, whatever that they would expect to see. I don't know what that number is. I have absolutely no idea how they put their bid together. I'm not privy to any of that. But I do know that typically I would expect that the unit price that they give would be an average of what they might expect to spend over the course of the 3 years to generate the profit that they want to see. Just simple math. So going from 2021 to 2022, we compensated them for the entire amount that they requested for, which would have included some of that inflation that they would have expected to see going from 21 to 22. I would have also expected that they would have accounted for some from 2022 to 2023. Normally, when we do a 2-year project, if we were to start a project in 2023, we would usually leave the last layer of blacktop off until 2024. They bid it. Usually, they don't even come back and ask for more money because they know that that's how they bid it. So you're on a 2-year project, you're looking at an average price over 2 years. A little easier for them, admittedly, to come up with a price over 2 years versus 3. Where I'm going with this is, I guess my opinion is the additional cost that they're asking for this year is really no different than what they would have seen if this was a 2-year project, because we essentially started over last year with a brand new unit price accounting for all of the increases to date. So some of that inflation should have been accounted for in the original bid. Furthermore, I would say that if they figured an average bid price back in 2021, the bid price was probably a little bit more that we were paying than what the actual cost was at the time, just because, again, figuring averages out. So it's about $4,000 on an $8 million project or whatever this is. That's a very, very small amount. End of the day, if you feel that it's appropriate to adjust that price, it's not a lot of money. End of the day, I guess my personal recommendation is that the unit price from last year should stand for this year, and that's how we should move forward. But I'll pause there and let you ask questions or give your opinions on what you'd like to see.
Oh, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate your verbal explanation. My concern is that it's not here. They're asking, just reading this packet without your explanation makes it look like they're asking for, asphalt call increase of $17,768. I would be more comfortable voting yes or no on the actual ask of what we're supposed to be increasing this time. You're saying it's about $4,000, which to me seems like not very much as opposed to 4 times that amount. So as of right now, I'm uncomfortable with the documentation because it doesn't reflect what you're saying. And it's a documentation from them, not from you guys, from what I'm looking at. So I'm not comfortable with any increases at all, whether we are to approve or deny them based on that right now. Because it's almost like they forgot the step from last year in their timeline. So I would be more comfortable with what you said from them indicating exactly what they're looking for as opposed to your, and your explanation was very good. I followed it right along. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm not willing to move forward until we get a better explanation in writing from them to document why the increase and that timeline. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, Matt, I have a couple questions. So so you said we paid them in their entirety, or in its entirety already?
Nope. What we did last year was we did a change order to adjust the unit price, so the price per ton. And I'm drawing a blank on the exact number, but I want to say it was like an $8.32, 23 cents, something like that per ton. And so as they laid the blacktop down, every ton that went down, it was $8.23 or whatever that number was per ton more than what the unit price was. And so that's what the change order reflected.
Okay, and that, they were paid that already though for last year's project?
For last year's
Okay.
project, yep.
So then in coming forward for now, for 2023, is it, when I do the math, it looks from the 570 that we went and increased last year. So we went from 415 to 570 last year, and then now they're asking 610, which is a 40-cent increase. Is that correct? Or $40 increase. So I think that's what Counselor Johnson is saying. There's like a missing document there.
Yeah, so, and I should clarify, what they're asking for, what I say $8.23, that is $8.23 per ton of bituminous mixture placed. $40 per ton of asphalt oil is their bulk asphalt oil price. That's not broken out over the per ton cost, so it ends up being, I did the math, it's just a hair over $2.
Okay,
When you put the 5% markup for the general contractor, it's just a hair over $2 a ton is what this additional request would amount to.
so I would agree that if there's just additional documentation on that breakdown, that would make me feel better moving forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. Counselor Motley?
I'm just curious what happens if we say no.
Contractually, they're tied to the original bid price. And with last year's change order on top of that, contractually, they're tied to that right now. If you say no, then they have the opportunity to come here and plead their case. And if it really was that big of a deal to them, it could end up in a legal proceeding, or they could say they're not gonna do the work, but then there's other financial ramifications possibly to them if they don't get the work done on time and they lose the legal argument. So right now they're paving, right now it's a $4,000 difference. I don't see that turning into a legal battle. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd be very surprised if the city would even let it go to a legal battle over $4,000. You're gonna spend much more than that trying to fight that. So I guess that's a long-winded answer of, right now they're contractually tied to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Freely?
So Sherry, when the city accepts a bid and then we budget accordingly for that bid, isn't it common practice then to add a percentage of contingency in anticipation of these types of costs?
Yes, it is, but I'll have to say this is the first for change of oil price.
Do we have a contingency in this budget for these projects?
Yes,
That
we
would
do,
cover
but I
it.
don't, what's the percentage, Matt?
Mr. Reed?
Yeah, and I guess two things to that, Counselor Freely, we are doing very well as far as the overall budget, just the overall budget number without the contingency. There's been very, very few changes to the project, and so we are actually running under budget on the project, without even counting for the contingency. We're running under budget right now, and then on top of that, we've got a 10% contingency built into the project, which is probably around, I'd say probably around $500,000.
Then considering the scope and scale of the work that's needing to be done in this city, I would move that we go ahead and accept this request on behalf of Mesabi Bituminous and the work they're doing for us.
Yeah, that's your motion. Motion by Counselor Freely to move the change order request by Mesabi Bituminous. Is there support? Is there support?
I'll support for discussion.
Support by Counselor Johnson for discussion. Further discussion, Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you, Counselor Freely, but I want to see in writing exactly what we're approving. I'm uncomfortable that the document states that the oil increase is $17,768.93. I would like to see a request from Mesabi Bituminous stating the actual request for this change order is X amount of dollars. We have something hard to provide.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Matt, Mr. Reed?
So if the sentiment of the council is that you'd like to, again, presuming the numbers are what I explained to you, want to move this ahead, I can prepare an official change order and have the contractors actually sign it and have it in time for the city council meeting next week, so you could officially approve it at that meeting if you want to.
Be very comfortable with that.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson and Counselor Beyondich.
You. And thank you for doing that. I was just going to suggest if we could keep the momentum going on the street projects, but have the proper paperwork in place, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. So it has been moved and supported at committee level to move it to the council meeting for additional documentation to be presented for a final vote at the city council meeting. So moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Matt.
Yep, I'll get that documentation over to Pam.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is, under appearances, is number 3. We have Mr. Matt Stark from Baker Tilly to review the sewer rate study and the proposed sewer rate increases to accommodate our PFA loan. Welcome, Mr. Stark, and if turn the light to green on the podium, and please state your name for the record, and welcome to the City Committee Home Meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am Matt Stark from Baker Tilly. We were recently engaged to perform a rate study for the for the sewer utility. And I believe my presentation is coming up on screen.
Okay, very good.
No, I have done my own things.
So while we're waiting for it to come up, Mr. Stark, so we asked you to prepare this study for a potential rate increase to help accommodate our payments to satisfy our PFA loan, and to make sure we pay that off. And I think we did last year, did discuss that there's a potential for a need to raise the sewer rates in order to accommodate that. And so as requested, you're going to be providing your presentation about what we need to do in order to satisfy our requirements for this process.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Suppose I can go through some of my introductory remarks while we're waiting for the
Would you
technical
please?
to catch up with us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stark.
Sure. Just kind of going over our process, I looked over recent financial performance for the fund over the last 4 years or so. So we'll look at that briefly and then talk about the assumptions that we used in our projections going forward. Take a quick look at the cash reserves that exist in the fund. Then I can move forward and show what our recommended rate adjustments are for the coming few years, and then kind of show you guys what that does as far as the financial projections with those adjustments. And then at the end, we'll have some sample bills so that you can see what the effects are on regular ratepayers. It should just be called Virginia Sewer. Top level. Go up a level. Sorry, they were looking for it in all of my miscellaneous files on that stick.
We apologize for the delay.
All right,
All right, thank you.
showtime. All right, so these are the points that I just went over. So we start with looking back. We're showing some numbers here since 2019. And in a nutshell, things were going pretty well. And then 2021, the fund received a fairly large capital grant, which improved its net position by almost $5 million. So that net position went from 13.7 million up to 18 point almost 7. Then in 2022, we had a bit of a road bump. Revenues were down a bit that year, and the performance of the fund's investments was poor. And so just kind of, you took a hit on the operating side and the non-operating side in '22. So that set you back a little bit, and then the budget for last year looked essentially neutral. 13,000 is, or 15,000 is not huge in the scheme of things. So this is also a look back on, this is on the cash side as opposed to sort of a profit and loss side. So the interesting thing here is that ending cash number about halfway down. We started with about $500,000 in ending cash. We had that big inflow in '21, which really boosted things. And then we've got a restricted cash line there in yellow for OPEB obligations. And so that started, essentially all of the fund's cash was restricted in those early years. With the inflows in '21, you had some unrestricted cash, which provided a bit of a cushion, which was good news. Down below, you'll see your minimum cash requirements. Debt service, 105%. That's an obligation from your actual debt agreements. I also put in 3 months of operations just because you want to have some cushion for any expected hiccups outside of your debt service obligations. So early on, we were well under what we would consider the minimum amount for the fund. Again, in '21, with the inflow of that grant, things improved considerably. For our projections moving forward, here's just a quick rundown of the basic assumptions that we were using. We looked at the amount of water sold over the last 4 years, and for our baseline, we took 90% of that average amount. We didn't want to overstate what we thought your revenues, what your sales were going to be. Number of accounts and volume used, we had that decreasing by about 0.5% annually. That's in line with recent trends. On the expense side, just the regular inflators that we used for most items was 3% annually. With the exception of chemicals for treatment, we are inflating those at 6% because they've shown a lot of growth in recent years, and we wanted to capture that. Debt service requirements, I believe you're well aware of what your debt service requirements are, but it's about $1.2 million annually for those payments. On the restricted cash side, we were just growing that restricted amount by $80,000 annually. That was just based on recent trends and performance so that we could capture that. I'll confess that wasn't terribly scientific, but we wanted to make sure we had a component in there for you. On the capital expenditure side, we started with $80,000 of capital expenditures for next year, and it just grows by $5,000 per year over the course of this projection. That's not really in your budget right now, but again, I wanted to have some contingency in there in case you guys needed to do a capital project of some sort, so that you'd have at least a little bit in there to take a bite out of that. And then on the fund balance, your investments, we were assuming that they could return 2% annually. That's pretty conservative, but given the recent roller coaster that we've all been on, we didn't want to overstate what those revenues might be. So minimum cash, I just touched on this. 3 months of operations plus 105% of next year's debt. And then on the restricted side, the amounts that we had set aside for OPEB obligations are not included when we're looking at our minimum cash levels. So moving forward, the rate structure as it's currently set, you've got a monthly base rate and then a volume rate. For our recommendations, we were recommending that the base rate remain unchanged and that any adjustments that we make apply on the volume side of things. So for the present, we were looking at, we would recommend a 7% increase, well, right now, if we can do it. The projections that we've got going forward are assuming that we've got 6 months' worth of additional revenues for this year. And then another 7% for 2024. The combination of those two increases will help with the baseline revenues, getting them up close to what we need for your obligations going forward. 2025, we've got what looks right now to be about a 4.5% increase that would be needed. And then after that, it's essentially 3% increases just to cover inflation. So the big hits up front is 7% right now, and then another 7% for 2024. So if we go forward with the recommended adjustments, the projections going forward, there's a lot of numbers on here, but essentially the bottom line there, change in net position, you'll see right now, even with the 7% going in, for the second half of this year, that 7% essentially lets you break even on the year. You'd come in about $15,000 for your change in net position. Then in future years, that gets a little bit better. Sometimes that change in net position can be a little, it doesn't tell the whole story because you do have some cash outlays that don't show up on this line because it's conversion of cash into other assets or lowering a liability. So in Virginia's case, I think the cash position is probably the more informative projection to keep an eye on. So you'll see at the top, we've got the cash, and then the bit in yellow that you'll see on the screen shows, okay, the principal payments and capital outlays, those weren't captured on that previous page because, again, it's not a balance sheet adjustment. You're just changing cash into either lowering a liability or buying a capital asset. That's offset by depreciation, which is up at the top, which is an expense that's not actually cash. So they do offset to some extent, but you're still sliding a bit. Looking at our ending cash, again, the restricted cash goes up a little bit every year. The unrestricted cash for this projection is staying right around $2 to $2.1 million in fund balance, which when we look at the debt service requirements, which is about $1.2 million, and then you've got another $600,000 or $650,000 for what we would consider the minimum amount for operations, you're coming in between $250,000 and $350,000 over what we would consider the minimum each year. So you've got a little bit of a cushion there, but as far as our recommended rate adjustments, we didn't want to go too much lower than this just because it's uncomfortable when you're just riding right on the razor's edge. A couple of charts and graphs. The orange pillars on there, that's just showing your rate increases each year. So this is that net income side where you see 2022, we were actually in the red, so it's below the bottom of that axis. 23, we were essentially neutral. And then 2024 and beyond, we've actually got some decent net income coming in. And then again, bounced it. On the cash balance side, you'll see that the cash balance that was up a little over $2.5 million after you got that capital grant, it comes down and levels out around that $2.1 million that I was just talking about. The blue line on there is showing what we would consider our recommended minimum cash. So you're sitting just above that line with what I would consider a comfortable margin. Not extravagant, but enough to relieve any heartburn. On the ratepayer side of things, currently, as of 2022, base rate was $5.10. Volume was $9.11 per 100 cubic feet. So moving forward, again, that base rate, we were going to keep that level, and the volume rate then would climb from that 911 up to 975 for the rest of this year, and then up into the $10.43 and up to $10.90. And then by the time we get out to the end of this projection in 2029, you're looking at right around 12 and a quarter per 100 cubic feet. There's 3 example customers below where you can see what their total bill would be. So customer 1 would be using 6 units of water per month. And so you'd see their bill going from essentially $60 last year would bump up to about 63 or 64 for the remainder of this year, and then up toward 67 and a half, and then 70. And then after that, we're looking at maybe $2 a month for adjustments after that. In terms of sort of the affordability test, looking at household incomes in Virginia, like 2022, you're sitting around 83% of what the affordability index would be considered. That gets up closer to 90 and then into the low 90s and even up to 95. But part of that is an artifact of we were only inflating your anticipated household income by 2%. The average over the last 5 years has been more like 4.3 or 4.4%. So we're understating what we think the household income is going to be in future years, but you're still underneath what we would consider that affordability threshold. Customer 3 at the bottom is someone who's only using 4 units of water a month, which is very much on the low side. It's 3,000 gallons a month. So they're sitting pretty in terms of affordability because, again, we're not touching that base rate. We're really looking at volumes. If you're using a lot of water, well, then you're going to be spending more because, again, it's the volume rate that we're looking at.
Sure.
Again, this same data, just in visual terms. The green bar is what we considered customer 1 using 6 units. The gray bar is the high usage, and then the blue bar is the low usage. And then that red line is what we would consider that affordability threshold that's based on household income. So we tried real hard to keep it under that line. So yeah, essentially we were looking at that 7% for the remainder of this year, and then another 7% for next year. And then we think a minor adjustment after that, around 4.5% for the following year.
Okay, I'd just like to make a comment. Thank you for coming up to make this presentation. I really appreciate it, Mr. Stark.
Certainly.
A quick question that I have for you is that, I guess a statement more or less is, I know that we're trying to keep the rates as low as we can for as long as we can, and the base rates being the same and the volume increases. But, and not to put an additional burden on the taxpayer or the people who live in the residence, but, it's a pretty thin margin as increase moving forward. And so if we have some unfunded mandates like we have in the past, when you alluded to the chemical costs associated with that, which is unfunded, and we have to figure out a way to do that, I'm not sure what the MPCA is going to do in the future with potential changes in the water sewer treatment and how that goes, and what other new technology that's determined to be for our facility, which is fairly new, and what we have to do with mercury and all those kind of things. So we anticipate that there's going to be some changes coming down the pike, and we don't know what that is. The volume, you're being very conservative, I think, in that regard, and I appreciate that. But so the recommendation you make is more than fair, in my opinion. So thank you. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I was writing a bunch of things down as you were presenting. The first thing I kind of want to just touch base on is the definition of OPEB, and then the correlation that it has to the water rate, or the water. So the OPEB is other post-employment benefits, and that's a fund that the city sets aside for those employees for future usage. Is that correct?
Yeah, the legacy costs.
Legacy?
Yes, essentially it's medical insurance for retirees is the big ticket in that bunch. I believe the city has its own dedicated OPEB fund that it uses for those purposes. The $80,000 a year that I was putting in for these projections was, and I'll ask Sherry to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was a supplementary, I don't know if we'd call it a payment, but just reserving that cash
Sherry?
I'm getting over my skis here.
Sherry?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, and Mr. Stark, thank you very much. Yes, the OPEB liability, it is one of our GASB 84s, so we are obligated to list it as a liability because it is. And yes, all that legacy has been sunsetted, but we just got through with an actuarial study, and I can send that electronically to all of you. But we are also paying as you go. It's around $1 million that we pay for retirees' insurance right now, every year that I budget. But at the same time, the good news is we do have a trust account, and it's already at 3 million, that OPEB and PARA actually administers it for us. So we are not touching that until we need to. If we don't use it, it's definitely an investment for later on. If we can keep paying as you go, which is what we're doing right now, then that just gets bigger.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the clarification I'm looking for then is there one OPEB fund or is there two, if you're saying this is based on supplemental?
Sherry?
Oh, I'm sorry. This would go into the OPEB. We'd have to
Okay.
make an investment transfer.
Okay.
Because we're still obligated to have,
So it's under the umbrella?
yes,
Okay, that's.
each department. And as we
Okay.
eliminate each department, we
Okay,
put in
and
it.
then the next question I had, just, and so also so the general public can understand, how is that correlated then to overall how you're planning this for our water increase, or sewer rate increase?
So if I'll just look back at your actual performance the last few years. Your operating expenses for this fund are on the order of, it varies a little bit, but 1.8 to 2 million per year. The personnel side of that is actually fairly small chunk of things, which is unusual when we're talking about government services, but sort of payroll expenses has fluctuated between 200, 250, up to 300,000 a year. So this 80,000 that we're talking about for just setting aside each year, it's a fairly sizable percentage of your personnel expenses historically, but in the scheme of the larger budget, that 80,000 against a budget of 2 million, and that's just, operating side is 2 million. You have another 1.2 million in debt service that the fund is paying every year. So the overall budget's actually fairly sizable. So yeah, that 80,000 that we're setting aside each year, it's significant in terms of payroll, but it's really not that big in terms of the total budget for the fund. And so I have to do some quick arithmetic to see what its contribution is to the rate adjustments, but it would be, a fraction of a percent out of that 7% that we're recommending.
Okay, so I don't know if that answers the question. How is OPEB intertwined with our sewer rate? Like, are we just taking that $80,000 and we've earmarked it that that's what we're going to utilize it to offset our sewer costs? Is that have been just historical past practice?
Sherry?
Counselor Paulson, no, it's part of the budget. It's an expense. So what we'll do is make a deposit or an investment into OPEB, which is going to take it from the sewer fund and deposit it with PARA in our trust account. So can't touch it.
So that's the correlation between the two
Right.
funds?
It's part of the expense.
Yeah.
And
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
In my model, in my projections, I was treating it as restricted cash.
Right.
If it were transferred into another fund, it wouldn't have any effect on these projections because I was treating it as being off limits
Got it.
regardless. So yeah, either it's in the sewer fund and we can't touch it, or it's in another fund and we can't touch it. But
Okay.
my
Thank you for
projections
that.
don't change.
I just wanted to clarify that in
Sure.
my mind. And then on the capital grant that we received in, I believe it was 2021 when we got that bump, what was that grant, where did that grant come from?
Sherry?
Counselor Paulson, that was the 53 bridge. We actually did an internal loan against ourselves, against the sewer funds, so we repaid it.
Okay,
So that belongs, and it's in the investments.
so that was removed initially for the bridge.
Highway
And then we
53
paid ourselves back. That's where that bump came up.
When we got it back from the Minnesota deed grant, reimbursed us, and we in turn reimbursed our internal loan, and then we had to reimburse public utilities too,
Perfect.
because we were the fiscal agent.
I'm just trying to break it down so I get it. And then I just have two more questions, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So then, on these unfunded mandates that have come forward, I would say over the last several years, is that what has depleted the fund basically, or caused us to be in a deficit for 2022 actual?
I don't think so. 2022, just revenues were down a bit. I think that was a fairly wet year, and so people weren't using as much water. And then on the non-operating side, the fund's investment
Went down.
went down.
Okay.
And the dividends were down, and then there was an adjustment for the fair market value of that investment. And so when those adjustments went in, that's what really hurt the fund in '22.
And then the last thing I guess I wanted to point out that you said we're running at between 83 and 90% of the affordability. I don't know what the term is.
Affordability, yeah, you can call it index or threshold. or
Affordability
whatever, yeah.
index or threshold. And then from that, is a 7% increase pretty significant in 1 year?
I mean, if you're paying the bill, of course it's significant. In the scheme of the utility rate studies that I've been working on over the last couple of years, this is actually fairly manageable.
And then in comparison to other communities, what you've seen, is that?
Yeah, I've been doing a number of these where I have to recommend a 24% increase
So
or a
7% is-
35% increase. And so I mean, it's never good news to see your bills going up, but, given some of the economic roller coaster rides that we've been on and some of the inflationary pressures that we went through the last couple of years, 7% this is one of the more reasonable, one of the smaller adjustments that I've
Thank you for answering.
recommended to somebody.
And then just the last part of my last question was utility assistance. People that are actually in need, do they increase utility assistance? I know that's an AEOA function, I believe, but do they increase utility assistance based on the percentages that the city would have to raise those sewer rates? Or no? That's just heating assistance, actually, probably not.
Yes, and Sherry, would you clarify that? But I know that's no, but
Sure, Mayor. Counselor Paulson, I believe it's just heating, but
heating.
every year, people have to apply for assistance, and I wouldn't rule it out. I would apply if you were eligible. But I do want to back up the train a little bit here. I'm just going to say chemicals, we've seen a double. I budgeted in '22 for this year, only 60,000. I can tell you right now, it's going to be around 120.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your time so much.
thank you for those questions, Counselor Paulson. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you explain why you're not recommending a base charge increase, a small increase there as well?
Kind of philosophically, as far as the rate adjustments, rate increases go, linking them to volume use allows users a little bit more control over their bill. And so to the extent that this is going to put a dent in your home budget, you can take some water conservation efforts to try to blunt some of these effects. Whereas if we go directly into the base rate, that's baked into the pie and there's nothing that you can do about that. If we had included both of those line items in rate adjustments, then instead of that 7%, it might have been 5.5 or 5 3/4. So it's not a tremendous change as far as the numbers that I'm recommending. But again, this way, just the idea here was that it does give the users a little bit more control over that impact to their home budget.
Do we know when the last sewer base rate increase was?
Sherry, was that, that was a few
I
years
was just
ago.
going to ask Matt, because I sent you the resolution. I think it was in
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what
2019.
year that was in. Is that 18?
I think it's, yeah, 18 or 19.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Okay, anything more?
No, that's the recommended numbers are what they are, and again, I'm happy to field any more questions that might come up, but
Okay, thank you. For me, it's a modest adjustment based upon what our needs are projected over to 2029. And, you know, based upon some of the may potential increases, I think there's a pretty modest adjustment moving forward. And I think I agree with the volume aspect of it, because the more you use, the more you pay. So, Councilor Beyondich.
Just a quick question. Is this something we revisit every year for rate increases, or how often do we do this?
Usually it happened last year when I was doing the budget, and then the unfunded mandates as far as the chemicals just were going out of this roof. So that's when I asked Mark to, hey, I think we need to get in line with our PFA loan. And, yeah, we can set a schedule, but no, normally we're hoping we set rates and they behave themselves, you know, but things beyond our circumstances or our control, such
yeah,
as
once
chemicals.
upon a time, I'd only do these every 4 or 5 years, but recent performance between, you know, pandemic impacts and some of the craziness with chemical costs and mandates from the state, it's become a more high-frequency revisiting of the numbers, just because there's so many different factors that are impacting fund performance that we're having to pay a bit more close attention to it.
Councilor Beyondich.
So if need be, because this one we have projected out to 2029, if those increases keep coming, this is something that we can revisit and make the adjustments, or are you saying go with this here and that should carry us through?
The recommendations for immediate and 2024, I'm very confident in those. I really do think those will need to be made and should be planned for. That 4.5% that I had recommended for 2025, you know, that's a little ways out, and we might see what's happening with the investment performance for the fund's investments, and if there's any more surprises that are coming down on the expense side. And again, that's something that the city can handle as part of the regular budgeting process. And if there are big question marks around the sewer fund a year from now or 2 years from now, then by all means give me a call. If everything is going swimmingly and things are doing better than expected, that 2025 adjustment might not need to be made, or it could be just cut down to a 3% or 2.5% regular inflationary increase. So, you know, that one's a little bit more of a gray area, but the two up front are, I believe, necessary regardless.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Okay, anybody else? Otherwise, would entertain a motion to, one way or the other, to move this to the city council meeting for a vote based upon the recommendation from Baker Tilly, Mr. Stark, for Baker Tilly. Move to approve the recommended increases to the sewer fund as proposed by Baker Tilly. Moved by Councilor Freely. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Stark, very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you coming up for this. Okay, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 4, under Street and Alley. Request from the Range Mental Health Center to close a portion of South 8th Avenue West on September 20th, 2023, between 2nd Street and 3rd Street South from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. We have representatives here from the Range Mental Health unit, and please come forward. And if you want to just give us a little explanation of why you want this closed, just a quick synopsis, and we'll, so the general public is aware, and we are all aware of what the request is for. Good morning, and please state your name for the record.
Morning. My name is Danny Spolert, and I am the Director of Crisis Services over at Range. And many of you may know we've been doing a pretty big renovation project at the Wellstone Center, and we are close to completion thanks to Katie Schulzenberg. So we are going to have an open house in September. We would like to close those 2 blocks just so we can have some parking area and no concern about people crossing back and forth from the park area to the building. I did bring a little map of where we needed to close and some invites for you guys.
Thanks again, Mr. Stark.
And we can approach the people that live right behind us directly and 1, invite them, and 2, let them know.
Yeah, and we would normally do that if we're going to close the street off and notify the individuals, but flyer, making that notification from Range of Health would be helpful. So you want to close a portion of 8th Avenue, right, between 2nd Street and 3rd Street South? Okay, thank you.
Is that adjacent to the Children's Memorial Park there?
Yes.
I would move that forward, their request.
Okay, moved by Councilor Freely to move that forward. Is there support? Support. By Councilor Johnson. Further discussion? Anything, Councilor Johnson, on the discussion part? Okay, moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's on a Wednesday, and then until I believe 5 p.m. Is there any issue that maybe needs to be communicated to the school for busing issues at all?
I don't believe so. That's why we didn't want to ask to have any closure going forward, because that's a pretty high traffic road during the school year.
So that there won't be any issue with dropping children off in those areas?
There won't be any school.
There won't be no.
This building will be closed.
Yeah, they'll be in the
Oh, sure.
new school.
Thank you for that. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. It has been moved and supported on the request from Range Mental Health to close facility for their open house between those areas, and we'll notify their neighbors as well as you will too. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carries. Thank you for your patience. Thanks for waiting. Have a great day. Okay, move to item 5, personnel. Busy time for the Personnel Committee. It was held on June 13th, 2023. Under 5A, review the updated letter of understanding for the Evelyn, Virginia Airport Authority Secretary Bookkeeper. And I would ask members of the Personnel Committee to give us a little synopsis of the recommendation. Councilor Beyondich.
You. I would like to thank the committee and the AFSCME staff for the patience. It was another lengthy conversation as I needed to feel comfortable and have everything clarified and wrapped up. I thought it was a very open discussion. And I feel very comfortable moving forward on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you came to an agreement, understanding of moving forward, so thank you for your hard work, working with the AFSCME with respect to this position. So I'm looking for any other information, requests, or comments by the council. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to move this forward.
So moved.
Move to approve the letter of understanding with this position, moved by Councilor Freely. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
I would just like to make a request that when the bill come to the airport, it has the $700 a month stipend and not an hourly breakout, since there's no hourly verbiage in the LOU, if that's acceptable.
Just the hourly rate equated to
It should,
Yeah.
the bill should say $700 monthly stipend. There should be no hourly rate in there, I wouldn't think, because the LOU doesn't state anything about, just for clarity, when we have to pay the bills at the airport, that it just says the $700 stipend.
Now, is that an issue for personnel? Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. That may be an issue because the employee is getting paid a stipend, but the bill that goes to the airport authority has some different breakdowns in it regarding, let's see if that's even in here, like go to my PC.
Right, but those would be separate line items. It wouldn't be an
Those are
hourly
separate line
rate.
items, and maybe Sherry can answer that better, but I don't have it in front of me, but I think when we discussed it, there was going to be some back billing because it's going back to January 1.
Thank you. Sherry?
Mayor.
Clarification.
Councilors, and Counselor Johnson, there will be payroll taxes in addition to that 700, because this is coming through the payroll, and there will be payroll taxes on that.
All right, when the first bill comes through, if there's questions, I will ask them accordingly. I'm not wanting to hang this up at all. It's long overdue, so it has my full support.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Johnson. Has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Item B, 5B, review the proposed split of the school resource officer, SRO position, and the community relations officer, the CRO position. So I think the CRO was also doing the SRO stuff too. So you're looking to separate this out, looking for some recommendations, some clarity, and some explanation from the Personnel Committee. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So we met with Chief Mattson and Britt, our city administrator, and Rock Ridge School District had approached staff to discuss the request that they have on a full-time SRO instead of a half-time SRO. Our current SRO is also our CRO, and Lieutenant Swenson, I believe, wanted to stay in the current position of the CRO, therefore that we would have to move an employee into a full-time SRO position that Rock Ridge School District would be paying for. And I believe that rate is being discussed between staff, city staff, and Rock Ridge staff. So that's kind of the, kind of in a nutshell, Lieutenant Swenson would stay at the Community Resource Officer and continue the amazing efforts that he has endeavored in the city of Virginia. And then there were, I believe, if I'm not correct, Chief Mattson said maybe 4 employees that expressed interest in moving into the full-time SRO position for the Rock Ridge School District.
Thank you. I would just have one question for the committee. And if Chief Mattson is fine with it, we're pulling another officer off the street in order to accomplish this goal and objective for the school year. And it may go into the summer programs as well. So is Chief Mattson comfortable by taking another officer off the street, a full-time SRO position? That's a concern for me because a lot of times they're working, short-staffed in some respects. To have a community service officer, I think that was the purpose, have the CRO and the SRO together. And I know the school was part-time for the school, and now they want a full-time position, which I fully support. My question is Chief Mattson comfortable with the fact that the chief can take another officer off the street to accomplish, to meet the requirements of the school, and at the same time provide the necessary resources for our city as far as patrol goes? Councilor Freely.
To be honest, we didn't really broach that subject. We talked specifically of the needs from the school district standpoint, and even with regard to like some vulnerability aspects of the new building, and the need for an officer to be present in that facility. And I would think that if there was an emergency in town, that officer would be called out if necessary. I don't know that for a fact, but we did not specifically broach the conversation with regard to one coming off of patrol here to be assigned up there.
Okay, thank you. I fully support the recommendation moving forward, but, okay, what do we have here? Yeah, the hours of the position will be to discuss with the school, what is the school is looking for, so there would be a, oh, I'm comfortable moving forward with this, and then we can work that out later on, how the staffing level goes for the regular patrol work. So thanks for the hard work for personnel, looking for a motion moving forward.
I'll move.
Councilor Paulson moves to approve, to allow staff to begin process to post for the school resource officer position, and supported by Councilor Freelieb. Is there any further discussion?
Motion is for both positions moving forward, or do we need to do them separately?
Did we vote on B already? Okay, let's vote on B. Review the proposed split of the school resource position and CRO. So we reviewed the proposed split, and so the motion is to approve this. So that's the motion on the floor by you, Councilor Paulson, support by Councilor Freelieb. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Now the second motion to allow staff to begin the process to post for the school resource officer position full-time.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Freelieb, supported by Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Item 5.D, direct staff to begin the developing a job description for the rental code inspector / housing inspector position to implement the rental code. And so my only question I have is that inspect or it's inspectors? It says one inspector. Are you just looking for the job description that you may hire more than one? Sherry, you have a clarification, just one?
So far, it's just one, and that's what I budgeted for next year.
Okay, very good, thank you. Anybody for anything from personnel? Looking for your recommendation or moving forward, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. In our packet, Jenny had included, it's number D in our packet. It's a wonderful flow chart, kind of about how the actual flow of from this person and then through the office, what the duties would be, as well as how things are going to be overlapped in the office. And then also, I'd probably let Jenny finish, but the checklist that she made was it's just fantastic, and I think it was compiled by a lot of due diligence on Jenny's part. But what I liked about it, and my takeaway on it, is it also pulls in the property preservation and maintenance code into it as well. So there's a lot of good things in here going forward. And I feel like we had just talked basically about one person, and there is training available to actually get a certification that Britt had mentioned. So I think as we move forward in crafting this, there'll be certification process as well. So this employee or future employee would have the necessary qualifications with the certificate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Jenny, any words to add?
Just one for clarification. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Paulson. The checklist was created by staff. Our building inspector went ahead and took the initiative on that. So I don't want to give credit to myself for something that somebody else did. So just wanted to make clarification for that. But I think the flow chart and the checklist went a long ways in showing the need for this position. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Looking for council action, or Councilor Motley.
Just in regards to the inspection checklist draft here, is there any way we can get this out to the landlords before we start officially inspecting next year so they're aware of what's coming? I mean, I know they're aware, but so they actually have a list?
Yeah, yes, and that's a very good point, Councilor Motley. I think we're having the staff develop the job description itself. And so once that job description gets, but yes, that would be something we'd have to do as part of this process, right, Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Motley. Yes, the intent is to put that checklist out prior to this going into applications being received, as well as sending out mailers to renters that we're aware of, or landlords that we're aware of, as well as, just kind of some fact sheets and flow charts like we've been creating. So, thank you.
Did I answer your question, Councilor Motley?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Very good, yes. Councilor Freely.
So Jenny, the timeline from going from draft status to official documentation and accepted by the council would be, do we know that?
I don't know that we have the specific timeline yet. However, once, as the mayor indicated, once the draft job description is approved by the Personnel Committee, which I believe the next meeting will be the 27th of June, and we should have a draft form for you to review by then, we'll be able to move forward with working on the checklist not being draft at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
My only concern is the sooner we get this information out, including the flow chart for that matter, to people in town, the sooner they're gonna begin the process of getting those things updated so that they'll be able to pass those inspections. So it gives them a heads up and a head start, and that's all beneficial to the landlords, the renters, and the city itself, so. But I appreciate the work that you've done, and I echo the sentiments of Councilor Paulson. This was very well done.
Yes, and I echo those comments. To thank you to the staff and Jenny for all your hard work in moving this forward. So do we have a motion? Looking for a motion to move this forward to the city council.
I'll make the motion.
Councilor Motley makes the motion to move it forward. This is supported by Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, under finance, approve the contract with Gornix for pigeon trapping for approximately 12 weeks at a cost of $3,500. Thank you for staff getting on this thing. Any questions, comments, or motions? Councilor Motley.
Is this something that we normally do in our city? It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Pigeon control has been an issue. How you control the pigeon population has been a sensitive one. So we've hired a organization, this individual who's done it before, who will do it in a humane way.
Thank you, Mayor.
So just
Councilor Freely.
conversation, is it live trapping and then we send them to a neighboring community?
It's live trapping and he relocates them.
Okay, into the wild.
He relocates them.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. In reading this, one location is the US Bank, and what I've noticed over I guess I would say the course of a month, and now since Norman's nightclub and Frank's have been demoed, there was a whole entire population, and I would like to maybe see some focus on that side of Chestnut Street. I don't know if there's a building or something, or where if they could just watch where those pigeons have gone. They were flocking, and maybe right by Grandy's, kind of in that area. So I don't know if that's a conversation we can have with Mr. Gornick, and kind of just tell him where we see the pattern has changed since the building has been demolished.
It's a good point, and Mr. Gornick, a while back, gave some presentation and a little history on the migration of pigeons and how they migrate from one place to another. If you displace them in one area, they go to another area. You displace them there, they gravitate to another area. So he follows that migration pattern. He's been all over this Chestnut Street, and that'll continue to move forward. And he'll look at all the problem areas that we have, not just that specific location. Motion? Move to approve by Councilor Freely. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Item 7, other items of concern. Review of the comprehensive housing needs assessment for Virginia. I want to thank staff, particularly Jenny, for getting this housing study out. It's 130 pages long, a lot for us to digest moving forward. But I would ask Jenny to please give us just a few highlights of this study as we can start reading it, regurgitating it, getting all that information so we can get this moving forward. Jenny?
Thank you, Mayor. I was able to get through the full document. I focused mainly on the text, not so much the graphics of it, because there's a lot in there. I also did review the 2021 study and the 2017 comprehensive plan. And, you know, there's areas identified by priority that are similar or same as 2021. Not a lot has changed in this update from that information. Senior housing, multifamily apartment housing, mid-scale starter homes, those are all things that are needed, identified in the reports. You know, the city has been, as identified in the update, as being really great at being proactive in economic and community development. And, you know, we need to get that correlation into the housing needs, I think, based on some of this information that's been provided, so that we see the success and growth of the city that we're looking for. Other opportunities that were identified included, you know, improvement to the condition of the housing stock. And I think that the rental and property maintenance codes will help address those issues specifically. There's obviously limited land, so we may be looking at redevelopment of areas, as well as limited areas of new construction. There is some area available for new construction. It's just because of how landlocked the city is, it'll be strategic in where we need to see that happen. You know, there's, again, just a need for all sorts of housing, very varied need, I think. So I don't know that we can go wrong with really any kind of development within the city. I think we need to focus in on where the council needs to look at where we want to see that happen, and where the best area for the different types of development are necessary. We also have our Housing Institute that we're a part of, and myself specifically and others within the community, that will be looking to address housing needs moving forward. So I think that it had been mentioned that there was a need for a housing task force, and I think that is the Housing Institute that will be moving forward through this coming year. Let's see, what else? Really, I think, you know, the new study, it reinforces the 2021 study that all types of housing are needed across the spectrum. And I know I'd take any questions or any additional information that you want me to provide specific. But in a nutshell, I think that is what the study has provided, the update has provided us.
Okay, thank you. And before we go to the council, just wanted to say thank you, Jenny, for all your hard work on this and for attending that Housing Institute presentation. I was there as an observer and to learn about moving forward and assigning those task forces of different various people in the community. Dana, who's in the audience, is part of that task force, Dana Hilton and others, to look at and help develop and provide some information for what's available in the area for us to consider moving forward. So we do have some representation on that Housing Study Task Force to kind of craft the needs that we have in our community and balance that against the needs of other communities as well. So thank you, Jenny, for sitting on that, and thank you, Dana, for sitting on it as well. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor, and that was just the question I was going to ask. What is the Housing Institute and what groups are associated with it?
Jenny?
Sure. Again, in a nutshell, and the Housing Institute was news to me as I took on the position that I was selected to be a part of it, but it's part of the position. And it's a group within the community, you know, staff included in that group, in my position, the HRA, other community members, the Laurentian Chamber of Commerce, there's community development, other community development staff in the county. The mayor was a part of the first one. And it's a group that's meeting to talk about housing and needs within the community. Not, I wouldn't say specifically, let's say, to Virginia, but the actual Quad Cities and the communities surrounding, so that we see where we can work together, what our strengths are, what our opportunities are, and working through just kind of open dialogue and conversation. And it does include, you know, there's some developers that have been a part of that or can be invited to be a part of that as well.
Okay, could we get a list of the involvement in that, and who's involved in that, and then any minutes that would come forward from those meetings, so we could also read those and process those together?
Yes, thank you. Jenny, could you have an opportunity to provide us, I know there's a member list. Could you maybe provide the member list to all the counselors? And then if there are any meeting minutes that are taken during this housing study, whatever information can be disseminated, could you give us a report every week and disseminate to us in any written form, any correspondence or any documents or any notes that we have so we can be educated as we move forward?
I certainly can provide the list. The minutes, I'm unaware if there were any taken. It's the Minnesota Housing Partnership that's kind of spearheading the initiative. But I can definitely reach out. I can provide what minutes or, context that I've taken in my note-taking to the council. And it isn't, I don't know when the next set date is for the next meeting, but it's throughout the summer, I believe, is the plan. So it may not be a routine weekly update.
Yeah, and I think the plan originally, when I sat in, I'm not on the task force, but I sat in and listened, they were talking about meeting on a quarterly basis, is that correct?
That sounds about right, yes.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yep, and I think any and all input is going to be valuable. I just want to know, is this region-wide, Quad City-wide? When we're looking at our new housing study here, it's specifically focused on Virginia, and I feel like that's kind of our task at hand, is to focus on the needs of our community based upon this study. So going forward, I think that'll all be helpful, and it'll come into play. But I really would like to see us have that focus around the needs of the city of Virginia. And what my takeaway, if I may, Mayor, on the housing
Councilor
study,
Paulson.
I think it's really important that we start maybe putting together like all available land tracts. We can kind of come together, relook at our comprehensive plan, what that stated in terms of housing. But what really struck me as interesting, and I didn't go back to 2017, I just went back, well, the 2017 I think was the comprehensive plan, which we all have. But I went back to the 2021, and I feel like the new one is a lot more robust than the original one in the last go-around. But what really struck me is seniors and the need for senior and baby boom housing, and how they basically said on the key takeaways, senior housing for seniors looking to move from their single-family homes to downsize to an active living situation amongst their peers. And then it kind of goes to discuss townhome style or condo style living, and that if we started with the seniors and put a plan together for that type of living for senior living with amenities, it made it very clear with amenities, that may open up single-family housing stock in the city of Virginia, and we are so landlocked. So that to me was kind of interesting, how if you give seniors and baby boomers an option of different housing for their needs, or empty nesters, I think was the other phrase that was used, that may in turn open up, since we are landlocked, it may open up a whole new housing stock for young families to come in and purchase those homes and maybe update those homes, and kind of goes in line with our property and maintenance and preservation code. So I felt like it kind of gave me an understanding of maybe where we'd like to start this, discussion. But I also feel like we need to find out all the maybe available land tracts that we have, and then look forward to putting these bullet points and maybe trying to see where they would best fit in the city of Virginia, and also in the Midway area. Also with the new school, it's a very interesting conversation about single-family dwellings and the need for higher-end starter homes, absolutely, but the need for higher-end single-family homes. So those are the things that kind of struck me as really interesting, and then how to basically how to create, if you put housing here for one group, it shifts the whole market so that other people can enter into the housing market. So I really appreciated and I read through a lot of the demographics. Our household median income has increased significantly in the city of Virginia, And the affordable rents have gone up. I think the affordable rents from between 15 and 1,700, from the median income being around 5,100. And that tells what basically the takeaway or the synopsis is: the rental stock that we have in the city of Virginia is under, Jenny, I don't know how you'd say it, is under, the current rents that are being offered right now are under what actually people can afford based on the median income. So those rents may be between 7 and 900, when the reality is the median income at 5,100 can afford rents anywhere between 15 and 1,700, where this housing study said there is actually a hole or a gap. So I'm really excited to continue this discussion and looking forward in planning future developments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. I think that what we're trying to do here, Jenny's already in the process of putting together that as you requested. We are looking forward to have that, her thumb on the pulse, so to speak, of what's going on in other communities and housing studies. It really helps us focus on, maybe developers are signing those things. So we look forward to that information coming to us from our planning department moving forward, so we can focus on the Virginia. But on that task force gives us an opportunity to find out what other communities are doing and what other options might be available, even if there might be some funding sources available we're not aware of. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you pointing out the ability to pay and what people can pay. And I think that goes back to what people are willing to pay for. As we've been finding out in the last several months, the availability of quality rental in town is almost nothing. And people struggle when they have a limited rental budget to pay for stuff they don't want to live in. And we've heard those stories. I think that this is going to be a much more complicated process. I like the idea of moving boomers, but those houses probably haven't been updated in 30 or 40 years. So I'd be curious to know what that looks like as we look at the housing stock and what it would take a young family or a young professional. That's the other part that, as I'm looking through this, we'd like to have a bunch of families come in, but the truth is that they start as young single professionals living in an apartment, not wanting to buy. The generation coming up doesn't necessarily want to buy a house. They don't want the responsibility of mowing and shoveling, and I think we need to be cognizant of making sure we're providing multiple options as we're moving forward with the housing study. We've had 3 different organizations come here in the last year wanting to build apartments. And I think that the recommendations indicate that we still need those apartments. We still need places for people to live who don't want a house, that can start somewhere and build their way up to monthly payments for a house, including insurance and taxes. We in this room we have to raise taxes. We just talked about raising utility rates. So I really think that it's a much bigger picture, and having a multi-pronged approach to both affordable housing for young professionals, affordable housing for young families, affordable housing for people in different transitional parts in life is important. It's not, for me, it's not a one-size-fits-all fix, and I think that that's the biggest thing I'm taking out of this housing study, is that we do need to have multiple pronged approach to helping folks live where they want to live. I feel it's not up to me to tell people where they should live. We should have the opportunities, and they will fill in. So I'll be keeping that in mind as we move forward on how we address the housing issue for everybody in town, and not just the few that are specifically mentioned here by name. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. So we'll continue to review this housing study. Jenny, you'll continue to provide us information with respect to that, the information that's requested by Councilor Paulson and others about getting what we need to keep us apprised of what's available, what our options are moving forward for the city of Virginia. At the same time, keeping your ears open on that task force to determine, what's the trend is and what the needs are, and what other communities might be doing, and maybe some additional funding sources you might have through that study in order to help us accomplish goals and objectives within the city of Virginia. So that being said, any other questions, comments? First, Councilor Beyondich, and then over to Councilor Freely. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And it's interesting to speak with some of the people from town that have actually left our community for housing elsewhere. And some of that is frustrating when they're, and I'll use myself as an example, as we age. My husband doesn't want to leave Virginia, but there aren't a whole lot of options for us to transition from our home to townhouse and, someplace that we can go and still do what we want to do, but not have all that responsibility. And I've heard of too many people leaving our community to seek that out in other communities. So I want to keep that in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Freely.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that we recently had two developers poised to do projects, one at the Bridgeview up there that talked about market rate and workforce housing. We also had Mr. Trimble come in to talk about the Midway site with regard to potentially 2 units, one that was multifamily and then one that was senior housing. So I don't know if it's appropriate and timely now that we've gotten this data available to us, and they were waiting on us to get that data as well, to reach back out to them in regard to those particular projects. But I don't know how much more homework we need to do before we start reaching out to those people that are poised to do these types of projects on available properties in Virginia.
And they were asking for the housing study, the updated housing study. We do have that updated housing study, and we will certainly provide them with that housing study.
And I also want to commend the agency that did the housing study. Very thorough, very well done. I did see one flaw, however, and it was repeated twice. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, so we should get that corrected in some form or fashion.
All right, thank you. Anybody else before we move on to Councilor Motley?
I feel like the type of housing that was being pushed in Virginia with funding provided by the state of Minnesota was not the type of housing that this housing study is recommending. Not 100%. I wanted to point out to the public something I found very interesting in this housing study. For you guys, it's page 162. It's the last paragraph. So I just wanted to read this so the public's aware of something interesting here. Mid-scale starter home housing. While the overall median housing price may be on the lower end, there seems to be a large gap within the Virginia community in housing. Single-family homes can be as low as $25,000 and exceed $1 million. Although it is in the opinion of HCA that single-family housing is in need in the Virginia market in any form, the largest gap seems to be in the range of $250,000 to $400,000. With the household income just over $62,135, taken into a housing budget conservatively at 28%, the typical household in Virginia can afford a mortgage of $1,449. This equates to a home sale around $250,000 with 20% down or $200,000 with no money down. It is highly recommended that community leaders invest time and effort into growing this price range of homes. Also, just another blurb here. Based on the analysis and conclusions outlined in this report, HCA recommends that the community leaders proactively plan for and accommodate a variety of housing types likely to be needed over the next 10 years, including additional multifamily rentals, condominiums, townhomes, scattered single-family units, and age-restricted senior housing. So what I find interesting about reading some of this study is that in it potentially a mortgage, a $250,000, 20% down or 200,000 with no money down, if the mortgage is going to be roughly $14.49 a month, that is extremely affordable considering I know of rental properties in this town that are very subpar and are charging that for rent. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Motley. Okay, so we'll look for some more additional information regarding this. I know that we're going through the housing study word by word by word and section by section, and so we're hoping to be able to digest this so we can have a more balanced approach to things. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add that I feel like it's more important that we pull together all of the information that is requested, the land tracts, kind of putting the comprehensive plan layer over this new housing study layer, over the land tracts available, and that we come up with a plan and then invite people back to the table instead of inviting people back to the table. And again, once again, piecemealing where the possible locations are of different potential projects. I feel like it's important that we come up with an overall plan of where we feel that we would like these different developments. And it should encompass all, like Jenny is saying, there's definitely room for all. I feel like it's just really important that we come together with all of the information available. And the Midway site, that was just, I guess, came forward. Interestingly enough, we met up with Matt Reed and we kind of just went around the whole property area from the Mulliver property that the city owns to that Midway site that we were asked to, I think it was the Trimble Group, to develop. And what I found interesting is if we were to start looking at, say, single-family dwelling housing tracts, that entry point would be the least expensive entry point to build and continue to move a housing development because of the rock involved and da-da-da, but the utilities are right there on that specific site. So before we invite people back to the table, I feel like it's really important that we look at the land that we have available and then spread out from there, and then invite developers back to the table, whether it be condo developers, townhome developers, apartment developers, single-family housing developers. There's going to be an array of developers that we are going to want to attract to come in, and we'll probably want to do some RFPs. So before we do that, I think it's premature to invite folks back to the table until we develop an overall plan with our available land tracts. And I had one other interesting conversation, and that was with Maxfield, who both of those groups kept referencing Maxfield. And I think Maxfield was, when John Fito was here, was asked to conduct our housing study for a significant amount of money, more than what we just paid to update this. So I reached out to Maxfield, and I talked to I think his name was Tim Mullins, very nice gentleman, very knowledgeable gentleman. But what he stated to me is that when these projects come and Maxfield was actually approached by what was the group name again? Trimble Group, and not the reverse. So Trimble went to Maxfield, and Maxfield produced the information. So that is one of the pieces of due diligence that I did on my own. But after talking to this gentleman, he said different groups are going to come forward based upon maybe Virginia's scoreability or what have you. But he said you have to keep in mind, you can't just go ahead and lock into one entity because they're all vying for the same dollars in this LIHTC dollars, grant dollars, and basically only one project is awarded per area. So if the city would have entered into contracts with any of those developers, we would be stuck right now with people that own land sections in Midway that they are competing, and maybe the John Fido development was awarded the LIHTC credits. That means that we just locked up available land in the city of Virginia. So I feel like before we go ahead and do that, we need to pump the brakes and we need to come up with a plan and then work with different developers or different groups according to what we assess are the proper needs and the proper placement of housing and condo and apartment living. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and I think that's, Jenny, you're involved in all, making sure that we have all that information moving forward and putting that plan together, so thank you for that, Councilor Paulson. Okay, anything else? Other items of concern? I have one, if I may. I just want to say what a great job our Park and Rec Department did in that Alcott Park. Unbelievable, just great professional work. Thank you. I know there was a lot of Facebook criticism by one particular individual about how the city is falling apart. Well, the Park and Rec had their own plan moving forward. Councilors got different calls about the Monkey Island, for example. It's all scheduled. They got it all taken care of. Everything looks really good. So thank you for the Park and Rec crew for all the hard work they did up Alcott Park, preparing it and cleaning it all up. And the same thing for the Public Works Department for the Land of the Loon Parade. I mean, they had the street spotless. They had watered all of the streets. They cleaned them all up. And after the parade was over, they were right back at it, cleaning it up again. So kudos to our staff. Phenomenal job. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And on that, to plan for the next two parades, I'd like to make a motion to authorize staff to purchase the appropriate amount of candy moving forward and budget accordingly, and flags. The flags were huge. We had 117 pounds of candy, and I think it lasted us about 3 blocks. So my motion is to direct staff to come back with a proposal for both the Twilight Winter Parade and the Land of the Loon Parade, so we can make sure we don't run out of either candy or flags.
Okay, that's a motion by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Paulson, and Councilor Beyondich, too. Is there any further discussion? You have some further discussion, Councilor Motley?
No, mine's after the motions.
Okay, let's vote on that. All those, did you have something else you wanted to add? Please, Councilor Beyondich.
The flags were a big hit. When you try to look out in the crowds for any veterans, any military, it meant a lot to them. The kids enjoyed them, but seeking out those who served was really special. So thank you.
Thank you very much for saying so. Moved and supported for that motion by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for a spirited discussion. I think we do have one more comment of other items concerned before we adjourn. Councilor Motley.
I'll make this quick. It's also in regards to the Land of the Loon. I've never obviously been a part of something like this before, which in reality was very small in the scheme of things. To be able to see a little of what happens with the wheels spinning behind the scenes with everything done leading up to, during, and after the weekend, wow. To our city workers in all departments, I commend you, and we are proud of you all. Also to our amazing volunteers, you rock, exclamation mark. Thank you for all you do. We appreciate you immensely. Great weather, great weekend. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Well said. I think we all echo those same comments. Okay. Anything else before to come for the committee of the whole meeting before we adjourn? Bueller? Anyone? We stand adjourned. Thank you.